Hello and welcome to Legalese. My name is Vince Perryman and I'm a local attorney with the law offices of J. Vincent Perryman. Each month, Legalese focuses on a wide range of legal issues and topics. Today's show covers real estate law. With us now is Neal Hanna of Saddle Creek Title. Welcome, Neal.
Thanks.
As a real estate lawyer, most people always think that you guys do nothing but closings and everything. So if you could just give us a brief overview of what it is that real estate attorneys actually take care of.
Sure. It's, that's a lot of it, but there's a lot of other things that go into it. Contract negotiation, discussions with people about development issues. There's also a lot of entity planning, setting up corporations or LLCs to own or develop or sell property. And there's a lot of estate and those sorts of issues that come into play as well.
Okay. One of the number one questions that I always hear from first-time home buyers is just how the closing process works. You know, it seems to be somewhat of a mystery there where your real estate agent gets the closing attorney.
Right.
Can you just give us a brief overview of that?
Yeah, sure. It's, and it varies every time, but, it starts from the point of negotiating your contract, and you'll select a closing agent. The buyer and the seller can always have different closing agents, or they can have the same closing agent. But when your real estate agent helps you put the contract together, you'll put somebody's name in there. That person will get faxed a copy of your contract. There's usually, at least for first-time home buyers, there's usually a lender involved. Those folks will need to make sure, you need to make sure that they know who your closing agent is going to be. A lot of times, lenders may not get a copy of the contract, and so you may be talking to your lender, and they may have no idea that you've selected a particular closing agent. So it's important for your agent and your lender to sort of be on the same page at that point in time. And you can also just make sure you let your closing agent know from very early on who your lender is going to be. Give them a contact information for that person so that the closing agent can get in touch with them and make sure that they've got everything that they need from the closing agent. The process from entering into the contract to closing is usually somewhere around 30 days. A lot of times it goes a little bit longer. It's not uncommon at all for the closing to come outside of the contract. In other words, take a little bit longer than what the outside date for closing was in the contract. And really there's not a whole lot that goes on during that period. What I will do is order a title abstract, and that takes a little while to get back. When that comes in, I'll review that and produce a title opinion and a title commitment that we send over to the lender, and the lender basically uses that information to underwrite their loan. We'll also need to get in touch with the buyer about the existing mortgage on the property and obtain payoffs. If you have a first and a second, we'll have to get written payoffs from those folks as well. And then usually somewhere between starting about 3 days before closing, we'll start working on the closing docs and ideally have you a hard figure as to how much money you'll have to bring within 24 hours before closing. Sometimes it takes a little longer because we don't get lender fees in until the last minute. But we'll put those documents together, get in touch with the buyer, tell them how much money they need to bring. They'll need to bring a cashier's check or have money wired, and so they'll want to have some sort of heads up as to how much money it's going to be so that they'll have time to go to their bank and get that check. When you come to closing, typically the buyer and the seller are not in the room at the same time, and that's the case even if you have the same closing agent. So the buyer will come in and we'll just walk through all their loan documents. They'll sign them. When they leave, we'll usually get a copy of the loan documents over to the lender for them to approve. Once they approve it, they'll forward their money to us, and we will make sure that all the payoffs happen, make sure that the seller gets their money, and then we'll exchange the seller's money for the warranty deed and the keys, and you're pretty much done.
Okay. In your experience, I guess I always hear about some closings go smoothly, some don't. What's sort of some of the number one hang-ups there that people should avoid?
Well, it seems that the biggest issue at the closing table is usually just a buyer coming in and thinking that they're going to pay certain fees to their lender, and or going to get a certain interest rate or certain terms on their loan. And then we get to the closing table and those terms are a little different. And it's hard for lenders to give an exact dollar figure because they're paying per diem interest depending on what day that you close. So it truly does vary every day. They've got to pay escrows typically for taxes and insurance, and so lenders don't typically know that exact number until they know the exact day that they're going to close. And so sometimes somebody just wasn't expecting to bring as much money. Sometimes the opposite happens and they're bringing a lot less money than they thought they were, but obviously that's not a problem at closing. Most of the problems are just related to that. Sometimes you'll have a buyer that's getting a seller to make certain repairs to the house that haven't been completed, and what we can usually do there is just do a contract addendum that says that the seller's got the obligation to make those repairs even after closing. So we usually can get around most of the problems at the closing table. It's just that you've got to be ready for those those issues to pop up, and it's one of those things where no closing is ever the same as the one before it.
Okay. Well, currently we're always hearing that the market's down and that real estate's not moving and things like that. In your experience with this, are you seeing more investment properties or?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, if you talk to builders, most of them are probably going to tell you that their sales are down. I know that there's some folks in town that are doing some projects that are selling well, but by and large, the new home construction is just virtually non-existent in terms of sales. The investment property is moving really well, and it has really come back recently. And I think there's several reasons why. One is that there's just a ton of that kind of property on the market in terms of foreclosed properties that banks are selling, and it is, for way under appraised value. So investors are wanting to get into that, and they're putting their money in there. And
okay.
Then,
well, we need to take a break, but we'll come back and talk more about investment in a moment.
All right.
When we return, we will continue our discussion about real estate law. Please stay with us.